or am I like dreaming? Is this some kind of fantasy? Like, no, this is Andy, you're alive. You're like, you are seeing this real time. So there was always those like reality checks for me. So that was interesting. I never like really had that in my mental planning, when I was back in Australia preparing for combat operations.
Did you discuss that with any of the other guys that were over there? And were they also going through the same, is this real sort of self-conversations?
Not like the, hey, let's, sit around in a circle and drink a Coke and talk about it. Right. It was more like, the swear words of the in the moments. Like you see like a strike fighter fly over your head at like, Mach 1 breaking the sound barrier, and like you're just in awe, and you've got a few F-bombs getting thrown around, and like, just the theatrics.
You can swear on the podcast, Andy.
Oh man. Right. So just that in itself is kind of like justifying to me, like, oh wow, like they're seeing this the same way I am, without having the, hey, do you feel the same way I feel? Because like the emotion, the raw body language kind of says it all.
How long was that deployment for?
We were over there, or I was over there a little bit longer. I was over, so about 4.5 months, because I stayed on a little bit longer after the main effort returned to like clean a lot of our equipment. Australia's quarantine standards are a lot higher than everyone else's. So anything that was required to come back to Australia, we went to a base over there, and, we were going over stuff with a fine tooth comb, making sure that it didn't have dust, grass, whatever, so it could be returned to Australia and pass quarantine. So yeah, that was my last little, I guess, like 3 weeks of Iraq. And I thought it was awesome because it allowed me and the guys that I was with to like kind of decompress, because it was like, hey, you've been in a bit of unusual conditions. You can kind of reset your thermostat before you go back to, do a load of laundry, go and pay the electric bill, go down and wait in line at, to get your registration for your car. Like, it allowed me to like reset a little bit.
It's interesting because you don't really think about, well, as a civvy, you don't really think about having to clean a vehicle for quarantine standards to bring it back into Australia.
It was freaking painful. But, the sun was out, we were getting tans, so, I was sweet with it.
You mentioned that obviously the time to recalibrate and decompress because of the unusual setting of what you guys had obviously been through. And I use guys as a plural term in terms of that. I know that there was probably women attached to you guys as well. I use it as a unisex term, everybody.
Sure.
But what would you say was the most confronting aspect of that deployment that you weren't expecting?
I think now I want to make it clear, I wasn't really involved in any like gunfights or battles in Iraq. So I hadn't really confronted that portion of my military career yet, but I did get confronted by the effects of war on humans. And what I'm talking about is the innocents that are caught in the middle. So there was the interaction of like the Iraqi civilians that were kind of like stuck in the middle. And that, I don't think, for me, it was a little bit different to East Timor because you were dealing with the regular populace, but it wasn't at the capacity where, people were getting blasted and, houses are getting demolished and roads are being destroyed and personal property is being compromised. You didn't really have to deal with that at the capacity that you did in Iraq. So the part of soldiering where the compassion and sympathy narrative was kind of introduced to me for the first time. And I hadn't really felt like I'd been exposed to that up until then. So that was a part of my being that I kind of had to kind of interpret and figure out on the fly. So that was probably the most confronting part of Iraq, dealing with the community that was there to be, picking up the pieces.
Mm.
The kids were the big part was the kids.
Do you want to elaborate on that, or are we moving on?
No, I think, with the kids, it's when I was that age, I wouldn't know how to deal with what I was seeing as a young adult. And for them, they just don't have the understanding, nor do they have the ability to understand, just through the language barrier, who these people are that have come, and they may not be able to direct the link of like looking at you, be like, you're directly responsible for all of the carnage that I can see in my life, but you're definitely affiliated with it. And you look different. You have an appearance that's incredibly intimidating, and I don't know how to deal with that. And, for me, maybe it was because I was a young adult, a senior teenager, if you will, and a younger soldier at that point in time. I think I had a little bit more sympathy because I had a younger sister, and when I saw kids around her age, that put me in a position where I was like, how would I want to relate to these kids in a way that my younger sister would think it's honorable, if that makes sense. So trying to defeat what you look like, and I'm sure, as a soldier with a rifle and a whole bunch of pyrotechnics and whatnot all over your body, you look pretty intimidating, and trying to let them know, hey, like, I'm not like this for you. Like, I'm a completely different person to you, but I look like this for a completely different reason, a different matter beyond your comprehension. And that was a difficult part for me to, and you just don't have time to be like, hey, like, there's things that you don't understand. You may think that we're the bad guys, but really, hopefully one day you realize that we're not.